Welcome to Historic Avenue, where we're ready to level up your English. Here we learn through stories that are slow, clear, and fun. Just listen, relax, and enjoy the journey. 1. Introduction. The situation in the Middle East is becoming increasingly difficult, with significant hostility growing between nations. Recently, the United States took a major step by attacking facilities in Iran. These sites were crucial to Iran's nuclear program. The United States declared that these attacks were necessary. Iran's response was not delayed. It retaliated swiftly. Iran launched a volley of missiles aimed at a United States military base. Located in the nation of Qatar, this retaliatory action by Iran has severely escalated the situation. Residents near the base reported hearing disturbances, describing extremely loud sounds overhead. These sounds were like massive explosions, and people also witnessed bright flashes of light in the sky. These lights emanated from systems designed to intercept aerial threats. These systems, known as air defenses, were attempting to prevent the missiles from reaching their targets on the ground. This incident is a component of a much larger conflict. A struggle is unfolding that involves Iran, Israel, and the United States. And it has been ongoing for some time. The U.S. actions against Iran's nuclear sites, followed by Iran's missile launch, are the latest developments in this larger struggle. They signal a significant escalation of the problems. This new attack by Iran on a U.S. base demonstrates the current gravity of the situation. It marks a serious moment in the ongoing troubles in the Middle East. The United States has military personnel stationed in numerous countries throughout the region. A primary installation is the Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. This base holds critical importance for the United States military's operations in the Middle East. A large number of American soldiers and civilian workers are stationed there. Reports indicate the presence of approximately 8,000 U.S. citizens at this base. It is from this base that the U.S. military coordinates many of its air operations in the region. The attack occurred shortly after the United States struck Iran's nuclear facilities. Iran's action was a direct response. It was Iran's method of demonstrating its capability to strike back. The situation is now extremely tense, and observers are waiting to see what will unfold next. Will the conflict de-escalate, or will it intensify? The attack on the base in Qatar represents a significant step in this challenging period. It highlights the high level of danger present in the Middle East. The conflict between these nations is now overt and serious. It impacts many individuals and countries in the area. This chapter will detail the beginning of these very challenging events. 2. Attack on the Basyan launched a missile strike targeting a large U.S. military installation in the country of Qatar. The base is known as Al Udeid Air Base. It stands as the largest U.S. military base in the entire Middle East. This installation is critically important, serving as the main headquarters for all U.S. air operations throughout the region. This work includes flying aircraft for various missions. Many U.S. military members and other American citizens are present at the base. There are about 8,000 U.S. personnel there. In addition, some soldiers from the United Kingdom's military are also working at this base. Some considered this base an obvious target due to its strategic importance for U.S. operations and its relative proximity to Iran. People residing nearby heard loud explosions in the sky and saw brilliant flashes of light. This was the air defense system in action as it worked to intercept the incoming missiles. News reports from Iran announced that its military had attacked the base, describing it as a powerful and successful operation. On Iranian state television, broadcasts showed images accompanied by patriotic music. On-screen text hailed the attack as a mighty and successful response by the armed forces of Iran to recent attacks on their country. Later, the military officially confirmed the attack had occurred. Iranian officials released a statement asserting that Iran must respond if its territory is attacked. They also declared that U.S. military bases in the region are not safe havens, but are instead weak spots, the government of Qatar provided. Information about the incident at the base stating that no one was hurt or killed in the attack. This was because personnel on the base had been moved to secure locations before the missiles arrived. The base was evacuated. Consequently, soldiers and other workers were unharmed. It remains unconfirmed if any of the missiles struck buildings or areas within the base, or if there was any resulting damage. Reports indicated there was no material damage. There were also reports concerning another potential target, a different U.S. military base located in Iraq, known as Ain al-Assad Base. U.S. soldiers are also stationed at this base. In total, the U.S. has approximately 40,000 troops spread across the region, and bases both large and small. Ain al-Assad is one of these key locations. Groups in Iraq allied with Iran have previously attacked this base. In 2020, Iran also fired missiles directly at the Ain al-Assad base. Due to this history, some speculated that this base in Iraq might also have been a target this time. Europe watches and warns. Europe watched the unfolding events with apprehension. The majority of European nations opposed further conflict and advocated for peace and dialogue. The United Kingdom's leader described the U.S. strikes as risky, while also acknowledging the threat posed by Iran's nuclear ambitions. The UK called for a return to the negotiating table to maintain stability. The European Union collectively urged a cessation of hostilities and a resumption of talks between the U.S. and Iran. An EU leader was clear that Iran should not acquire a nuclear weapon, but emphasized that war was not the solution. France also called for calm, seeking to prevent the conflict from escalating. While opposing Iran's nuclear program, the French government maintained that dialogue was the correct approach. Germany expressed similar concerns about potential escalation, with its leaders advocating for a collaborative international effort. To resolve the crisis, Russia, a major Eurasian power, strongly condemned the U.S. strikes as a violation of international law. A senior Russian official accused the U.S. of recklessness, and President Vladimir Putin called for urgent high-level talks to avert a major war. Smaller European nations also voiced their support for peace and diplomacy over military action. Switzerland, with its history of neutrality, offered its services as a mediator. Throughout Europe, many analysts worried that the U.S. strike could galvanize public support for the Iranian government and complicate future diplomatic efforts. Point 6. Reactions from Asia. Africa and the Americas, nations distant from the Middle East, also monitored the U.S. actions, holding diverse perspectives on the attacks against Iran. In Asia, China was vociferous in its condemnation, stating the U.S. strikes violated international law and would exacerbate regional instability. Beijing called for an immediate halt to the fighting and a return to dialogue. Japan appealed for peace. While concerned about Iran's nuclear ambitions, it did not fully endorse the U.S. military action and sought a swift de-escalation. South Korea also urged calm, expressing regret over the use of force while acknowledging the security concerns regarding Iran's weapons program. South Korea aligned its position with the U.S. and Japan. India observed the situation closely, calling for dialogue to resolve the issues and for a general calming of tensions. Reflecting its friendly relations with Iran, particularly in the oil sector, Pakistan voiced strong disapproval of the U.S. attacks, deeming them dangerous and contrary to international law. Islamabad warned that regional conflict threatened its own security and urged all parties to engage in dialogue to find a peaceful resolution farther afield. US allies Australia and New Zealand also called for peace and dialogue, emphasizing that it was a time for diplomacy, not combat. Many African nations appealed for calm and peace talks. South Africa expressed shock at the use of force, and the African Union conveyed the deep concern of its member states. Nigeria and Kenya also called for peace. A prevalent sentiment in Africa was that this was another instance of external powers causing regional turmoil, with additional worries about the potential impact on global oil prices in the Americas. Responses were mixed. Canada called for peace and dialogue, urging both sides to de-escalate to ensure public safety. Mexico also issued an immediate call for peace and a cessation of hostilities. In Latin America, some left-leaning governments were vehemently opposed, denouncing the U.S. attacks as illegal and highly dangerous. Nations such as Venezuela, Colombia, and Cuba strongly criticized the U.S. action. In contrast, right-leaning governments in Latin America were more cautious, with some, like Argentina, being slightly more supportive of the U.S., though the majority, still urged restraint and an end to the fighting, highlighting the need for arms control regulations. Thus, a global consensus emerged from countries far from the conflict, calling for peace and dialogue in the wake of the U.S. strikes on Iran, driven by a desire to prevent further escalation. 7. U.S. internal division and global public opinion within the United States. The strikes elicited sharply divided opinions among leaders and the public. President Donald Trump and his administration staunchly defended the action as essential to halt Iran's perilous nuclear program and protect the U.S. and its allies, hailing the strikes as a tactical triumph. Some Republican lawmakers concurred, with the president lauding his decisive action to neutralize a threat. However, numerous other politicians, predominantly Democrats, but including some Republicans, were highly critical. They contended that the president had overstepped his authority by initiating a major military action without prior congressional approval. Concerns were raised about the extent of presidential war-making powers, which they argued posed a significant constitutional issue and risked dragging the nation into a broader conflict. These legislators called for special briefings to obtain complete information and debate limitations on the president's war powers, some suggesting the action's illegality. The American public was similarly divided. While some segments of the population supported the strikes out of fear of Iran's nuclear ambitions, many others opposed them. Large-scale protests erupted in numerous U.S. cities, with demonstrators carrying signs with slogans like "No War with Iran" and chanting "For Peace." They expressed fears that the strikes would precipitate a larger, more protracted, and costly conflict. One protester remarked that the president's military action had effectively foreclosed any possibility of diplomatic engagement with Iran. Globally, public opinion was also split. Though it leaned towards criticism of the U.S. action, various groups and private citizens in numerous countries organized protests against the strikes. 5. The tense aftermath. The United States government had previously stated that if Iran attacked, the U.S. would respond with overwhelming force. This was a grave warning. Now, the United States faced a critical decision on its next course of action. Would it launch a major counterattack, or would it attempt to de-escalate the conflict? It was a precarious moment. Simultaneously, the fighting between Iran and Israel was still ongoing, which made the situation even more perilous. Every attack risked provoking another, creating a dangerous cycle where one side strikes, the other feels compelled to strike back. Iran claimed it used the same number of missiles as the U.S. had used bombs, framing its action as a balanced reply. However, this type of retaliation can cause a situation to spiral out of control. It is difficult to halt a conflict once it has begun. Both sides feel pressured to respond to the other's actions to avoid appearing weak. This is particularly true for Iran's leadership, who need to show strength to their people. Yet an excessive response could also be detrimental, potentially igniting a larger, uncontrollable war. There seemed to be a lack of effective intervention to stop the fighting. Other nations were observing, but not actively bringing the parties together for dialogue. There was a noticeable absence of diplomacy, the process of countries talking to find peaceful solutions. Without communication, breaking the cycle of attacks becomes much harder. What happens next remains uncertain. Will the United States retaliate with a large-scale attack? Will Iran strike again? Will the conflict between Iran and Israel de-escalate or intensify? The situation is incredibly tense. Many are worried about the future of the Middle East, as the danger of a wider conflict is very real. 6. Lessons from the crisis. The recent events teach us valuable lessons. We have seen how rapidly a situation can become dangerous. One action led to a reaction, which led to another, creating a cycle that appears to be intensifying. When one country acts, another feels obligated to respond, which can quickly worsen circumstances. The missile attack on the military base was a direct response to prior attacks, demonstrating that nations are prepared to use military force. We learned that peace in this region is not robust. It is fragile and can be easily shattered. When missiles are flying and defense systems are active, it shows just how close the region is to a major conflict. People had to take shelter and air travel was halted, illustrating the widespread fear and the immediate disruption to daily life. It is also evident that controlling the situation is difficult for all parties involved. Leaders are faced with tough choices. They want to project strength, especially to their own populations. But they also want to avoid a catastrophic war that would harm many more people. Striking the right balance is extremely challenging. Unplanned events occur that can make the situation even harder to manage. We learned that when nations have unresolved conflicts, the entire region can become less secure. The actions of one country can have a ripple effect on many others. The future of the region is uncertain. Will the cycle of attacks and responses be broken, or will it continue and expand? How countries communicate or fail to communicate now of critical importance. These events show that finding ways to reduce tensions and prevent more fighting is the greatest challenge for everyone involved.